In the late summer of 1814, a glow could be seen on the night sky from 50 miles away. It wasn't a sunrise. It was the reflection of a nation's capital, set ablaze, the most profound humiliation for the young American Republic. It was, by all appearances, the Republic's lowest ebb.
Welcome to Insight History HD. Together, we will peel back the layers of narratives long locked away in the archives of history.
So let's set the scene. It's August 1814. The Napoleonic Wars in Europe have finally ended, and with Napoleon gone, the full, undivided attention of the British Empire could turn west. Its war with the United States, which had been something of a sideshow, was about to escalate dramatically. You see, the Burning of Washington wasn't about strategic conquest. It was a punitive expedition. It was a powerful and deeply personal message of dominance.
British troops marched right through a city whose defenders had all but evaporated. They set fire to the unfinished Capitol, the Library of Congress, the Executive Mansion, the Treasury, and these weren't just buildings. They were the very symbols of American sovereignty, now just charred shells. It was a devastating physical blow to the psyche of a nation barely a few decades old.
The sheer scale of the chaos is captured in a desperate postscript sent to officials as the British closed in. According to the National Archives, the lack of preparation was so complete that the nation's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, they were saved only by a last-minute scramble, literally bundled into coarse linen sacks and hurried away. This wasn't a battle, it was an absolute rout.
But the flames of Washington, as dramatic and humiliating as they were actually masking a far greater strategic objective. The sack of the Capitol was a brutal, but honestly a brilliant diversion. The real target, the decisive blow meant to shatter the American Union, was aimed hundreds of miles to the north.
The real prize was control of a single vital waterway, the corridor formed by Lake Champlain and the Hudson River. To seize this, well, it was the 19th century equivalent of an invading army capturing a nation's entire interstate highway system and its main supply artery in one single stroke. It would have cut the industrial heart of New England off from the rest of the states and effectively ended the war on British terms.
And this was the force tasked with that mission. We're talking 14,000 of Britain's finest troops, veterans hardened by years of fighting Napoleon's armies, marching south from Canada under the command of Sir George Prevost. It was the largest, most professional British force ever to set foot on American soil.
And standing in their way, it wasn't some grand army. It was a small, outgunned American naval squadron on Lake Champlain, commanded by the 30-year-old Commodore Thomas MacDonough. Everything, the integrity of the border, the outcome of the war, the future of the nation itself, it all rested on this handful of ships.
And the odds? Well, they were not in America's favor. As documented by the Naval History and Heritage Command, the British squadron was not only larger, but it also possessed superior firepower. Its anchor was the brand-new 36-gun frigate HMS Confidence, a warship specifically designed to dominate the lake. MacDonough's force, on the other hand, was a pretty makeshift collection of smaller, less powerful vessels.
On the morning of September 11th, the battle began. For nearly 3 hours, the fleets just tore into each other at point-blank range. It was a chaotic melee of splintering wood and cannon fire, but MacDonough had an ace up his sleeve. He had anchored his ships with complex spring lines, anticipating exactly this kind of fight. And in the heat of battle, this allowed him to winch his flagship, the Saratoga, completely around, bringing a fresh, undamaged side to bear on the battered British flagship. It was an act of tactical genius, and it turned the entire tide of the battle.
The smoke had barely cleared over Lake Champlain when the news began its slow journey across the Atlantic. It would arrive weeks later, not as a mere military report, but as a diplomatic bombshell, landing right in the middle of peace negotiations that were underway in Ghent, Belgium.
And right here, this is where we see the butterfly effect of a single, forgotten battle. Before the news from Plattsburgh, British diplomats were completely confident of victory and were demanding huge territorial concessions. They were arguing from a position of incredible strength. After the news arrived, their entire position just collapsed. They were forced to abandon their claims and accept a treaty that simply restored pre-war borders. A 3-hour fight on a remote lake had completely redrawn the map of peace.
The strategic logic was undeniable, and it was stated plainly by the British commander himself. As historical accounts record, Sir George Purvey, despite having this massive and undefeated army on shore, immediately ordered a retreat back to Canada. He knew with absolute certainty that without naval control of Lake Champlain, his army's supply line was completely severed. His invasion had become impossible.
So even though the War of 1812 ended in what was technically a stalemate, no territory was exchanged, its psychological impact on the United States was profound. This stunning reversal of fortune, from the ashes of the capital to a nation-saving victory, it ignited something entirely new in the American spirit.
This keen observation comes from Albert Gallatin, one of the American peace commissioners in Ghent. As cited in the historical analysis, The War of 1812, The Rise of American Nationalism, Gallatin understood that the war's true legacy wasn't written on a map, but in the minds of its citizens. A shared struggle, a shared humiliation, and a shared improbable victory had begun to forge a disjointed collection of states into a much more unified nation.
This unlikely sense of victory ushered in what historians now call the era of good feelings. A country that had begun the war deeply divided and suffered humiliating defeats now developed a sort of selective memory, choosing to focus on triumphs like Plattsburgh and New Orleans. For the first time, symbols like the flag and a new song penned during the Siege of Baltimore, the Star-Spangled Banner, became central to a shared national identity, asserting America's place in the world.
If this journey has offered you a new perspective, support our exploration by subscribing to Insight History HD. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next narrative.